Fiction, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Alistair. His 5-year mission, to explore strange old people. To seek out popularity and acceptance into regular society. To boldly write what no man would ever write. Before. Starring High-Pitched Wine as Delilah, Seto Kaiba as Dr. Big Chin, Daniel Putnam as The Space Chip, Leroy Haggerty as Redshirt number 3, Horrible Gelatinous Blob as himself, Mark Wing Davies as The Book, Sexy Voice as the narrator. And deep voice as Alistair. Chapter 8. The First End and Beginning. Delilah stared at horror as the rope snapped and both Annalise and Mike fell backwards. As soon as Mike fell over the edge, Alistair moved. Delilah whipped around to see Alistair hunched forward, grunting in pain. He was shaking all over. It looked like he was having a seizure. Then something happened that she'd never expected. He fell off the cliff. Alistair's shirt was ripped apart from his back as two huge feathery wings burst out through the fabric. Pop! As soon as they were completely out of the cloth, Alistair ran to the cliff edge and dove over the edge. Delilah heard him yell as he fell out of sight. "Hold on, Mike!" His voice bouncing off the rock, much like Mike's body. Delilah was in complete shock at what just happened. She didn't even hear Annalise crying beside her. She was sobbing uncontrollably, curled into the fetal position. Delilah helped Annalise to her feet. Slowly they walked over to the edge and looked down. Alistair was halfway down, flapping those massive wings to stay airborne. Delilah noticed the rope had caught on a fissure in the cliff, catching Mike. But instead of stopping him, it caused him to swing inward on the rock, hitting it with tremendous force. After a moment, Alistair kicked off the wall, heading straight back to camp. Delilah discerned a sloping path to go down to the foot of the cliff. They moved slowly, picking their way down with care. Once they reached the ground, Annalise had stopped crying. They reached camp a few minutes later. Alistair was kneeling next to the exposed entrance to the boys' tent. His wings splayed out behind him. As they approached, he leaned back and sighed heavily. He was holding a damp rag, which had the stain of red on it. At the sight of the red, both girls headed over with a quicker pace. It's not good. He's lost so much blood. I can't do any more for him. Alistair stood up and moved the car as Delilah and Annalise pushed forward to examine Mike. Mike was lying on a sleeping pad, covered with blankets. His shirt had been pulled off, leaving his white skin exposed. Annalise gasped at seeing Mike's head. There was dried blood caked everywhere over Mike's hair and face, leaving a small part of his face a pale gray, like a zombie. As they watched, a small trickle of bluish liquid dripped down his face. Annalise tore her eyes away and began to cry again in earnest, because people always earnestly cry. Delilah grasped Annalise while looking over at the car. Alistair was pulling out a small case. He brought it back and opened it. Inside was a disassembled satellite phone. Alistair picked up the components and began arranging them together. Boy, isn't that convenient he happened to have a satellite phone? Annalise was letting loose horrible dry sobs that racked her whole body as Alistair held up the completed sat phone and dialed a number. Standing up, he walked slowly away, his wings folded behind his back, speaking into the phone. Annalise crawled into the tent and knelt next to Mike, red-eyed and silent. Mike's eyes were closed with just the faintest white peeking through. Okay. Annalise slowly touched his face. Mike twitched at the touch, but otherwise didn't move, breathing in shallow, ragged breaths. Delilah watched Annalise until Alistair crouched down next to her. "All right, I've called the paramedics. They're coming to airlift him to the nearest hospital. If all goes well, he could be transferred today to Bountiful Medical, which is much farther away." "How long till they get here?" "Who knows? It'll be at least an hour, I think. Hopefully it won't be much longer than that." Delilah sighed heavily and focused on Alistair. Alistair's wings had torn his shirt to shreds, but his torso wasn't uncovered. A skin-tight suit was underneath, similar in appearance to the sleeveless wetsuit. It was black. Hold up. It's black. Not green and gold. It's just black. And had large slits in the back for his wings. It looked very thin, but very protective. "What is this?" Delilah asked, trying to take her mind off Mike. "It's called Magus Loricatus." Pause. Okay. Magus Loricatus. Magus Loricatus. Basically, what he did is he took real Latin and made it bad. It's like Harry Potter all over again. "It's called Wingardium Leviosa. It's called Magus Loricatus, or magic armor. It can strengthen in solidity when pressure is applied." Delilah touched the armor. It felt a lot like a racing jersey, smooth and flexible. Alistair pounded on another spot of the armor with his fist. Delilah touched the spot and found it had hardened, like a rock. It had been placed underneath the surface, yet no visible change had transpired. "It's quite useful," Alistair said, looking inside the tent where Annalise was still leaning over Mike's unconscious form, and realizing that this was probably not the best time to start explaining his wardrobe. Delilah thought about that for a while before turning her attention to the other mystery, the large feathery wings sticking out of the back of Alistair's back. The back of Alistair's back. Wouldn't that be the front of Alistair's back? It's a double negative. The wings themselves seemed to be attached seamlessly to Alistair's back. They looked similar to the wings found on angels, but with slight differences. Alistair's wings were the color of copper, interspersed with golden feathers at regular intervals. They were folded slightly in on themselves, allowing Alistair to move around without difficulty. Without difficulty? Okay, yeah, without difficulty. The gold feathers also seemed to pulse slightly, as if attached internally to Alistair's heartbeat. Alistair stood up. "I need to watch for that helicopter so I can guide them to us. Delilah, stay here and keep Mike stable. Annalise, try to keep his temperature level. Wipe that blood you can away. But whatever you do, don't try and clot the brain fluid. It needs to drain without interference. Call if anything else happens." "Okay."